Have you ever heard about a man so wicked that God himself removed him directly, without warning, without public judgment, and without a second chance, a man whose fate is sealed in a single biblical sentence, yet whose short and almost forgotten life triggered a chain of events that would forever shape the lineage that leads to Jesus Christ? Welcome to the portal of salvation. Thank you to everyone who already follows this channel and faithfully walks with us through these deep biblical stories. And if you are here for the first time, this is the moment to subscribe, activate notifications, and stay until the very end, because what you are about to hear may completely change the way you understand spiritual privilege, responsibility, and God's sovereign plan. And do not forget to share this message with someone who is searching for meaning, because today we are uncovering the shocking and often overlooked story of the man God killed. A story short in words but immense in consequences. And to understand why his life ended so abruptly, we must return to the era of the patriarchs, long before kings, prophets, and the law of Moses, a time when God was forming the people of Israel and carefully establishing the lineage through which the Messiah would come. Because was the firstborn son of Judah, the fourth son of Jacob, also called Israel, and this detail is crucial since from Judah would later come King David, and according to Christian belief, Jesus Christ himself, meaning that was born as the direct heir of God's covenant promises given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, carrying an extraordinary spiritual privilege that very few people in history have ever carried. Yet Scripture consistently teaches us that privilege never replaces character, and before examining our sin, we must understand a critical decision made by his father Judah, a decision that altered the spiritual environment of his family, because at one point Judah separated himself from his brothers and settled in the region of Adullam, distancing himself from the spiritual legacy of his ancestors, and there Judah made a choice that broke with the example set by Abraham and Isaac by marrying a Sephensbastas, Canaanite woman, the daughter of a man named Shua. A detail many readers overlook, but one with deep spiritual implications, because the Canaanites did not share faith in the God of Abraham they practiced. Idolatry, ritual immorality, and values opposed to God's covenant, and despite clear warnings passed down through generations. Judah allowed this influence into his household, and it is within this spiritually compromised environment that was born. A child raised between two worlds, heir to divine promises, yet shaped by a culture foreign to God's covenant. And Genesis chapter 38 simply states that the firstborn was born and named a position of immense importance in the ancient world, because the firstborn did not only receive a double portion of inheritance, but also carried the spiritual responsibility of leading the family and preserving the covenant legacy, meaning was not an ordinary son but a critical link in the chain of God's redemptive plan. Yet the Bible remains strangely silent about Ez's upbringing, his character development, or his spiritual formation. A silence that prepares us for a sudden and unsettling conclusion, because when he reached adulthood, Judah took a wife for him named Tamar, whose name means palm tree, a symbol of righteousness, strength, and uprightness. And although Scripture does not specify her background, it becomes clear through the narrative that Tamar understood God's purpose for Judah's family better than the men themselves, because this marriage was not merely social or cultural, but a sacred union meant to produce descendants to preserve the promised lineage. Yet something dark and unexpected happens, because Genesis states with chilling brevity that was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and that the Lord put him to death, with no explanation, no recorded warning, no description of the offense. Just one sentence that ends his life and marks him as the first individual in Scripture whose death is directly attributed to divine action. And this lack of detail does not soften the judgment, but intensifies it, because throughout Scripture God is described as merciful, patient, and slow to anger, which leads us to understand that Ez's wickedness must have been deliberate, severe, and persistent. And while the Bible does not specify the exact sin, Jewish tradition suggests possibilities such as extreme selfishness, refusal to fulfill his marital responsibility, cruelty toward Tamar, or the introduction of idolatrous practices into his household, but regardless of the specific act, the message is unmistakable. Ar received immense privilege and squandered it, and his death created a dangerous void in the lineage of promise, a void that threatened the continuation of God's redemptive plan. And it is here that we encounter an ancient custom later formalized in Mosaic law, but already practiced among the patriarchs, known as levirate, marriage which required a brother to marry the widow of a deceased man who had no children in order to preserve his name and inheritance. And Judah instructs his second son Onan to fulfill this duty with Tamar, yet Onan agrees to the marriage but rejects its purpose, because he knows the child would not legally be his and would threaten his inheritance. And instead of honoring God's design, he repeatedly acts in selfish rebellion. And Scripture states once again that what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and Onan too was put to death, 2 sons removed. 2 judgments, 1 root cause, selfishness and resistance to God's purpose. And now Judah is gripped by fear, unwilling to give his 3rd son Shelah to Tamar, choosing self-preservation over justice, sending Tamar away under false promises, leaving her a widow with no future, no protection, and no hope. Yet Tamar understands that more than her personal future is at stake. The very lineage of the promise is in danger. And when men fail, God often works through the unexpected, because Tamar, a powerless widow in a patriarchal society, acts with courage and determination, exposing Judah's injustice through a bold and risky plan. And when confronted with undeniable truth, Judah publicly confesses, declaring that Tamar is more righteous than he is. A confession that marks a turning point, and from that union twins are born, Zerah and Perez. And once again, God overturns human expectation, because it is Perez, not the one marked as firstborn, who becomes the bearer of the promise, the ancestor of King David and ultimately Jesus Christ, demonstrating that God's purposes cannot be stopped by human failure, fear, or sin. Because where I had everything and lost it, Tamar had nothing, and preserved everything, teaching us that spiritual privilege without character leads to loss, but faithfulness in adversity can shape eternity and centuries later. The Gospel of Matthew deliberately includes Tamar and the genealogy of Jesus, reminding us that God weaves redemption out of broken stories, that life emerges from death, that grace overflows where sin once dominated, and now the question is not only about our Judah or Tamar, but about us. Will we be remembered for the privilege we wasted or the legacy we protected? And if this story challenged you, leave a comment, like this video, share it with others, and follow this channel for more powerful biblical narratives that reveal how God's plan advances even through human failure.